Warriors dangerously close to falling out of the playoff picture entirely. Chris Broussard, the Warrior weekend that was, big deal or no big deal?
It's not a big deal. I mean, look, the 51-point loss, that's bad. But I remember in 1998, Portland lost by 50 or more and still made the playoffs. I remember in the 80s, Houston losing by more than 50, making the playoffs. So a team can have a horrible night, especially when Steph and Draymond weren't there. Look, go back a few years. If you take KD, Steph, Draymond, and Klay off the court, could I see that Warriors championship team getting blasted? Maybe not by 50, but I could see them having a bad night and getting blown out. So I'm not going to make too much of that. My big takeaway, though, is that they are more than a Klay Thompson addition next year away from winning a championship. And that's what they got to try to do. I think they'll be a top Western Conference team with Klay, but their goal, of course, is to win a championship. And they're going to need more than Klay Thompson to beat the Lakers and the Clippers and the Brooklyn Nets and Philadelphia and some of these other, even a Milwaukee perhaps. So I was actually hoping, for the sake of really good competitive balance and to see if the Warriors could get back, that they could make a move for an Aaron Gordon at the trade deadline. I knew it was improbable, but I thought that, they probably, we'll see if they bring back Kelly Oubre. But I would have tried to put Oubre in the deal to try to get an Aaron Gordon or somebody like that. Look, they won't have money this summer, but Blake Griffin will be out there as a free agent. Rashawn Holmes, I don't know if they can pull some strings to add a kind of an athletic big, but they're going to need something in addition to Klay to try to win a championship next year.
Yeah, listen, if the Sacramento Kings added Klay Thompson this summer, we wouldn't say, oh, they're title contenders. And right now, the Warriors are the Kings. They have the same record, a game difference in the standings, and we're 50 games into the season. Now, I actually think the Atlanta game was a bigger deal than the blowout to the Raptors, but let's go back to that Raptors game because Steve Kerr said it was humiliating for everyone involved. Well, I guess we can show the clip, deal with humiliation, everyone in different ways, because for Steph, at the tail end of this game, he's, everybody is kung fu fighting on the sideline in the midst of a game where his team trailed by 61 points, which is the second biggest deficit any team has faced in the last 18 years. But I think what's more instructive, to Broussard's point, was this fourth quarter sequence from last night when they had everybody. Because let's watch these 5 possessions as the Warriors are trying to get back in the game. And what you're going to see is a team that is screwed. Okay, so Steph and Draymond, their 2 best players, can't get on the same page. You deal with it. Then you have Oubre, who is a starter for this team. And guess what? The Hawks are like, you can take that shot. Next time down the court, this is really your only offense. Get it to Steph, let him shoot. He happened to miss it. Next time down the court, Andrew Wiggins, Broussard, one of his 10 favorite players, I think. Wiggins, why don't you go isolate? You're on a max deal. Clang, clang, clang. And then the shot that is indicative of how different they are than 5 years ago, watch how they defend Draymond. They don't. That's not giving him room. That is everyone in the restricted area. You can't run offense like this. This was a 2.5-minute stretch where the Warriors had 5 possessions. They played good defense, and they couldn't cut into the lead. Because right now, this team is not a functional team offensively unless Steph goes incandescent. And I think Draymond is a big part of it. Wiggins has never been good. He's a part of it. Oubre's having a rough year. So, what are you going to do? So I feel like the Warriors, Broussard put it right, Brandon. They are not a Klay Thompson away from winning a title. Right. They might be a Klay Thompson away from making the playoffs because, as Jenna laid out, Brandon, they're a half game up from the 11 seed, even in the expanded playoffs.
Yeah, the ramifications of not only last night or this week in the last 8 games is big. It's Steph Curry moving on. That's what I see. If you look at these last 8 games, they won 1 game. How is that possible when you have Steph Curry, one of the greatest players ever? Come on. So the way this thing is shaping out to me is that Steph Curry, it's time for him to look elsewhere. They have no answers, Kevin. They don't. The best of Draymond Green we've already seen, and like you guys said, Klay Thompson, he comes back. Then what do you have? You're not competing. So this organization really needs to assess what the future looks like for them, and they need to figure out how to move forward. And if I'm Steph Curry, I'm also doing the same thing because I'm 33 and I still have a lot of basketball left in me. Do I really want to just sit there out in the Bay and just wither away? No way. So, Kevin, this is big. Not only this weekend, not only the big loss, but the last 8 games is really telling to where this organization is headed.
Yep. See, here's my thing, Broussard. What made this team great and different was the fact that they played with optimism and they played with joy. That was Steve Kerr's big thing. Play with joy, play with joy. And they just felt like a fun team to watch. They weren't the Pistons, the bad boys. They weren't like, they didn't have like the scowling Jordan. They played fun. But now I think the other edge of the optimism sword is swinging and really hurting them. They think they're going to be great when Klay Thompson comes back. They think, oh, next year, we can still be good. But Steph's getting a year older, and they have won 38 games since Durant went down. I don't think if I'm Steph Curry, I'm constantly as optimistic. And I want to be like, you know what? Yeah, next year. They kept the pick instead of trying to move it to really maximize Steph's present. It reminds me a little bit of Patriots Tom Brady. All right, we're trying to be in the mix. Tom Brady's like, you know what? I'm done. I want to win right now. Go all in. I don't want to develop Wiseman. I'm sure he's a great guy. I don't want to develop him. I'm getting older. Let's win right now, and it's not happening.
Well, let me just talk about the elephant in the room because we know there was a talk, a week or so ago, about LeBron recruiting Steph Curry to the Lakers. Now, most people poo-pooed it, which I agree. I don't see Steph leaving the Warriors, okay? I don't think it benefits him. His legacy is set. I don't think it benefits him necessarily to leave the Warriors. However, I'll throw this out. The one condition that it might make some sense or at least, become a conversation that we can take seriously is what if Brooklyn runs through the league this year? What if they go through the Eastern Conference playoffs, lose a game or two? And then they go to the finals and play the Lakers, Clippers, Nuggets, whoever gets out of the West,
and they win
in 5 games or sweep them.
Yep.
And they look like the Kevin Durant Warriors. Then it becomes, okay, we got to build a team that can compete with them. And that's when a Steph, LeBron, AD combination starts to make some sense. But outside of that, I don't think it makes any sense for Steph to even consider something like that.
So on that point, Broussard, you and I feel very similarly. I don't think that's going to happen with Brooklyn at all, but that's what I said last week is the only circumstances that exist is if Brooklyn ends up being this seemingly unbeatable team come the playoffs and every other guy around the league is like, well, what do we want to do? But I want to stay on Steph and quickly I do want to throw it back to Broussard because before this year, I had the audacity to ask the question of, what if the Warriors are bad? What does it mean for Steph? And, there are different little segments of NBA media. There is, the top-tier, upper echelon. Broussard traffics in both. Broussard's in the top tier. He's at those cocktail parties. Kevin Wildes, I think, used to host those cocktail parties. And then he also hangs down in the muck with me, the guys throwing bombs, right? And I asked the question, what if the Warriors are bad? Because James Harden has never been on a bad team. Chris Paul's never been on a bad team since he was young. You look around the league, who's the best player other than Steph on a bad team? Is it Bradley Beal? And 2 weeks into the season, when Steph was averaging 35 points, folks that acted like that conversation was an insult, didn't even want to have it. They were willing to have it on the opposite end. They were willing to say, oh, for those fools that doubted Steph Curry, look now. All right, well, now we're 50 games in and the team's terrible. And Broussard, that's not supposed to happen if a great player is healthy. It's never happened to Chris Paul. It's never happened to James Harden. It's the first time it's ever happened to Russell Westbrook is right now, and Russ is no longer a great player. It's never happened to Durant. Forget LeBron and those guys. Like, does that not resonate at all when we're talking about a guy who is considered by some one of the 15 greatest players ever? His team's not, he's been here all year. His team's not supposed to be bad.
I'm not going to make that drop Steph's historical ranking. Number one, Allen Iverson had some bad seasons with his teams. Charles Barkley had some bad seasons with his teams. Russell Westbrook, I still think, is a very good player. He's averaging a triple-double. He just had 21 assists and 34 points, a triple-double nobody's ever accomplished. So he's still having a good player, but a bad year with his team. And it's also different, Nick, for small players. And you did mention correctly, Chris Paul never had a season like this. But small players don't carry their teams like this. And beyond everything else, here's the clincher for Steph Curry that trumps all. He was the architect of the greatest dynasty since Shaq and Kobe. He did that. All right, and he did it before Kevin Durant got there. We can argue over whether they would have won those rings had Durant not gone there, but he built this team. He's changed the game. He's one of only two small players, Isaiah Thomas, the legend, being the other one, who created dynasties built around themselves. So you can never take that away from Steph.
And I want to go back to what you said a couple minutes ago. You said if the Brooklyn Nets, like this is the only scenario you see Steph Curry leaving the Bay. If the Nets, they run through the league. If the Nets get to the finals, they go against Denver, they go against the Clippers, they go against the Lakers. Anybody who make it out the West,
Here we go.
and they sweep them, they win in 5. Like then we can see it. Well, look, this is what I want to say. He better start packing.
Here we go.
He better start packing. Hey, West Hollywood is not a bad city. I like the Hills. Beverly Hills is good. And guess what? His wife, Miss Curry, the Food Network has an amazing studio there for her. So they better get ready.
Steph
They
ain't
should start
moving
having
to
those
West
conversations right
Hollywood.
now.